tell me about Graham's, family life, grade school, junior high school. Was money a thing? Was it a stressor? Was your father and mother an entrepreneur? What was all of that like?
My mom was a therapist, but I would say, mostly stayed with me as a kid. Okay. So she would do therapy like around my school time and stuff like that. My dad was an animator. Oh. So neither one of them were like, crazy savants or anything like that with money. I would say they weren't like poor by like we never had a time where there was like not food on the table and stuff like that. But it was something where they would always rent. They couldn't buy a house when they were in Los Angeles. I mean, everything is so expensive there.
Even then, right?
Oh yeah, even then. I remember there was a house that they wanted to buy initially that I think they got offered like $350,000. This is the house that they were renting, $350,000. They couldn't do it. Now that house is probably worth 1.8. So, I mean, go figure. But yeah, neither one. For me, money, I think I'd always just naturally been interested in it in some capacity. Like my earliest recollections are getting birthday money or like Christmas money. Like my grandma would sometimes give me a 20.
Right.
And I would save them. Like I wouldn't want to spend that money.
Okay.
I think the only times I'd maybe spend the money, like Pokemon cards. But for the most part, I would save it. I remember like keeping an envelope in my bedroom and just, I got like, I really interested when it hit like $100.
Okay.
Or the idea of like, I could save this and like if I get a 50, we're gonna have $150. There's no purpose, but I think I just naturally gravitated towards that.
So even when you were, I'll call it a teenager for lack of a better age, or maybe before that.
Before then.
You were always this person. You were always a saver. Because that's when you watch your stuff over the last couple of years, it's still who you are.
Yeah.
You're still living way, way, way below your means, probably lower than you've ever done, just because the revenue is so high. But you were that way probably since birth.
Oh yeah, like they had that marshmallow test where they have like
one, two.
Or you could have two later. I'm like, let's forego the two. When
What's next?
Maybe it'll be 5 a year from now. Like I'd rather the 5. So I've always just been like mentally that type of person to delay things as long as possible.
So when did Graham get his first quote unquote job? And not necessarily the one after high. Like, were you doing anything in school, or was your job to go to school and get good grades?
My first job that I really there was a thing in, I don't even know if this doesn't count, but I've never told this one before. I was in, I think it was kindergarten.
Okay.
And you got to leave class a little early to go help the lunch lady.
Oh, okay.
And so I took it. And I think I was the only kid in the class that like took this thing. And I'm like, why wouldn't you take this? You would get a free lunch. And back then, by the way, like there was not the concept of like my parents couldn't afford food for me, but just the idea that I would be able to get this lunch provided. And like I'd get a free lunch. I would do that because my parents would never give me money to go lunch. They'd pack me to lunch. So I thought it was cool. Like I get a free lunch out of this, like a free cafeteria hot lunch.
Nice. Okay.
And I'd help out the lunch lady. I had so much fun doing that. So they would put me with like the hairnet on and the gloves.
And you're
I'd
5
put on
or
this little
6.
apron, something like that. Yeah. And I'd be behind. I thought it was so cool that the kids would come up and like I was in charge of potatoes or something like that, or macaroni. And I'd sit there and like put it on the plate.
Wow.
And I loved it. It was just, for me, it was cool to do something like that.
Okay.
And I just enjoyed it. But from that, I think, I was never just into school. Like I went to an alternative school in Los Angeles where they didn't have any grades. They didn't have any structure. Like everyone, they called it different cores. Like you're a core 1, core 2, core 3. Core 1 was like kindergarten, 1st, 2nd. Core 2 is like 3rd, 4th, 5th. And then you had 6th, 7th, 8th. So all the grades were together in one.
Okay.
So I was in a class with people 2 years older, and 2 years later, I was in a class with 2 years younger. And we'd all have these like group classes, no grades. We get checks, check plus, check minuses.
Wow.
And I mean, I think it was a bit of a joke in terms of learning, but it really taught you just like interpersonal dynamics, expressing your feelings, thinking outside the box, questioning why we do things the way, and I think that really helped me. So I was never like into school.
Okay.
I think I was just kind of used to that sort of environment where we question things and we do things our own way, and we're all celebrated for being individuals and everyone's unique. And so that's kind of how I grew up. And I must have been 11 years old, so this is like 2001. I was really into like having pets, and my dad would go and like get me like a pet tarantula, or like a leopard gecko, or just cool things. So I was always into pets, but I'd go to Allen's Aquarium in Los Angeles on Lincoln Boulevard, and I'd see the saltwater fish.
Sure.
And my parents were like, no, you're not going to get saltwater fish because it's like really hard to maintain. It's really expensive. Like we can't do saltwater.
Yeah.
We can do freshwater.
Okay.
But I always wanted saltwater. And I think my dad teamed up with my grandma one year for, it was either a birthday or a Christmas, and they got me a saltwater aquarium.
Nice.
I was hooked. And this is about the time the internet was coming to be.
Okay.
So I would go on the internet and I'd type in saltwaterfish.com. And just like, and they had a forum. So I'd be on this forum all the time, like talking to these people about aquariums. I got so into it. And just in the process of doing that, I think I would just like get home from school and all I wanted to do is go on saltwaterfish.com and talk aquariums with people online. Like that's all I wanted to do. And I'd like, before I go to bed, I would check and see if people commented on my threads, because these were like bulletin boards back then.
Yep.
And I checked the comments and I thought it was so cool. But that evolved.
And again, you're 12-ish.
I was 12. Yeah, something like that. But I had this hyper fixation on saltwater aquariums for whatever reason.
You
like
found
that.
your thing, you focused, and
was
you
it.
just daily discipline.
Yeah. And what ended up happening, I went from that forum to like reeflounge.com to, and then there was like reefcentral.com, which is like the big aquarium forum at the time. Like everyone was on Reef Central. And I found a local aquarium enthusiast like meetup. I think it was called like MASLAC or something. The Marine Aquarium of Los Angeles County, Marine Aquarium Enthusiast of Los Angeles County. It's like something like that. And I'd go to these like monthly meetings for aquarium enthusiasts who would like rent out a back room at Denny's.
Right.
And there would be someone giving a presentation on like the ideal calcium if you want to like grow certain corals, or like the ideal pH, how to set up a marine tank. I was just enthralled by this thing. My parents would go with me and they were really supportive.
Wow.
Take me to the Denny's, and like I was a kid and I'd just get introduced to all these people. But what really changed it for me is I got a digital camera. Again, for a birthday or a Christmas, I got really into photography. So I'd take pictures of my aquarium and then post it on the forums. And people would comment on it. And I thought it was pretty good because I'd be really into like macro photography. And there was a meetup. It was called a frag swap.
Okay.
And so it would be a thing where like all the coral that you saw in that tank, I could go in with scissors and cut it.
Okay.
And then give it to somebody else or sell it to somebody else. They'll plant it on the rock and it'll grow into another colony. And they could, so people would go and take pieces of their coral and trade them with each other.
Oh, okay.
Because it was a lot better than taking it from the ocean. You want it raised in an aquarium.
Yeah, okay.
So I would go to these frag swaps and take pictures of like people's tanks, because everyone would host it at their house, or take pictures of coral. And through that, I met someone who was the manager of this like marine aquarium wholesaler.
Sure.
And said, hey, we're really into this. We can talk to your parents, but if you're interested, come by. We can just show you the place. And I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, like this, like they were a sponsor of like Reef Central. So you would see like their banner at the top. I thought this like, oh my God, like the big deal here.
Right.
So my parents drove me down and I was just taking photos of everything. I was just so interested in it. And the owner, his name was Chris. And we actually had him on the podcast at the Iced Coffee Hour. It was one of our first episodes, which was really cool to have. But he asked me if I wanted to just help out after school. And he checked with my parents.
Sure.
It's like, he's 12 years old, but if like he wants to just come and help, and, he could help take pictures. He could help, take care of some of the livestock and make boxes.
Right.
And they said yes. So I think it was every like Tuesday and Thursday I'd go after school. And they would just drop me off. Like, I think the first few times they're a little cautious, so they're like going to hang out. But then after like the third or fourth time, they realize this guy's not a creep. He's got a family. He's he's legit. So they drop me off at like 3 p.m. and pick me up at like 8. But the entire time I was just like bagging up fish and coral. I was making boxes. I was helping piece together
you were having
orders.
the time of your life.
I loved it. It was the funnest thing. They'd give me like a sheet like this that would say like 3 of these fish, 5 of these snails, 2 of these corals. And I would go through and then find them in the whole warehouse and put them in rows. And then those rows would be backed up by somebody else. But I would go through, or they'd give me the sheet and say, make sure all these rows are correct.
Oh, okay.
And I'd go through and, find everything. And sometimes I'd be like, this piece doesn't look quite healthy. And I'd point that out and we swap it in with a new one. I loved it. But that's what got me into working. But that moment for me made me realize, like, why am I going to school? Like, I just want to do work. And like, I really like this. And there's no point in going to school because I just want to do this.